Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm your host, Nika Sherelle, and this is the ItCast Real Talk on Sex. The ItCast is our community outreach podcast that increases diversity in conversations on health and sexuality. Through this work, we are creating a world where all people feel loved, honored, and respected. We have some events coming up this season for you. Next Wednesday, we have From Monogamy to Polyamory Virtual Summit, hosted by Elizabeth Cunningham, one of my dear close friends and colleagues. That'll be Wednesday, December 7th from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And you can catch me from 1:30 to 2 o'clock talking about metamors. During my talk, metamors, what the fuck? This is a free summit. The link is in the description, so please hop over there and join us next Wednesday. We also have the Global Sexual Health and Freedom Summit coming up February 4th and 5th, 2023. This is the first summit created to empower all people around the world to embrace sexuality as an aspect of being human that connects us all. With 14 speakers on topics ranging from wound health and loving your body to changing limiting beliefs and overcoming prejudice. Please go register at sexhealthsummit.com so that you can join us at that summit. If you would like to have one-on-one coaching with me, you can visit my Linktree, which is also in the descriptions, and go ahead and book a free connection session with me. Click the link in the comments as well to submit your questions on the show. We want to know what you want to know. We want to hear from you. So please pop them in the chat today or feel free to send them along before or after episodes. You can get access to our bonus content on Patreon, www.patreon.com/Nika Sherelle. You'll get awesome access to our bonus content, chats we do with the guests, as well as event access. So like, go check it out, check out the work we do and get some of those lovely perks. Okay, definitely subscribe to this YouTube channel, share this work with your community, and now let's dive in. This week's topic is something in the oven, real talk on criminalizing pregnancy. Today in the booth, we have Zoe and Nan from My Bakery, My Choice. My Bakery, My Choice is a small bakery that donates 100% of its proceeds to abortion access funds to those in the United States where procedure is banned. The procedure is banned. It is run by Nan and a star baker and mother of the best friend Zoe, who bakes a bit, but mainly helps the bureaucratic bits. As Californians, we feel our obligation to help those seeking abortion all across the United States. All right, Zoe and Nan, join us on the show.
Hello.
Hello.
Huh. It says
Oh, I got you. I got you. There you go.
Thank you.
All right. Awesome. Sorry for my stumbling. Thank you so much for being here on the show today.
Thanks for having
us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So to go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and why you were choosing to do the show today.
You start, Zoe.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm Zoe. I'm a born and raised San Francisco native. I got really interested in sort of what we've talked about in the past, Nika. I got really interested in working with abortion rights specifically, just because of a general sense of inequality I felt growing up. I feel like that was something that as a child I could really easily perceive. And I just started thinking about it in every context. And in the case of abortion, I feel like it intersects a lot of areas of inequality, be it about gender, but also about race, about socioeconomic status, etc. So to me, it just feels, that's a lot of why I'm here today, just to talk about what we do, what's going on in terms of criminalizing pregnancy, and how I felt that I could personally get involved just as a normal person.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I love the work, and I have tasted the baked goods. Incredible. And really what you're making out there is magic and supporting the people who don't have access to this. So thank you. Nan.
Hi there, I'm Nan. I've lived in the Bay Area for more than 40 years. I am not a native, but I feel like one now, basically. And I was there the first time around, kind of, when I was in college in the 70s when Roe v. Wade was established. And I guess in some ways I just have taken it for granted because most of my adult life, I mean, I knew that the access to abortion was eroding, more and more and more around the country in various ways. But it wasn't until the Dobbs decision that it just, oh my God, it just, hit me how dramatic things have become, and in a way that's even different from when I was young and dealing with it. It's just gotten so much worse and so much more just entrenched. So I was looking for something to do, but it's hard to find. In California, it's tough because we have a lot of rights here, and so there aren't local organizations particularly. And it was Zoe who came up with this great idea. I've loved to bake, and she said she was going to have a bake sale one weekend to raise money for these funds, and did I want to participate? And I thought, sure, of course I do. And it just sort of grew from there when we decided we can do this more than once and really make at least be able to participate and do something concrete rather than just rail against it, which is, what we all do all the time.
Yeah.
I love the structure where it's like an everlasting bake sale.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, effectively, it's a glorified bake sale. That's what I tell people. I mean, our goal is to also get another in farmers markets particularly, but the brick and mortar is sort of out of our purview.
Not, I can understand that as someone in business, brick and mortar, it takes quite a bit.
Yes.
And, it can also take quite a bit from the business if you're not able to really sustain a structure like that. And also growth, like you've been around, you're fairly new. I know, like we met doing some early stage business work, and I'm really excited. You've put structure around this, like it's not just, setting up the bake sale lemonade stand, but like you actually have a structure to fund other organizations. And I think that's really, really huge.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to give a teeny shout out to the people who helped us, because we knew we wanted to establish an official nonprofit. And I contacted a lot of friends and lawyers, and nobody really, it looked like we were going to have to spend a lot of money, frankly, to hire a lawyer and do it. And for people who have any interest in doing something similar, we were hooked up with the Berkeley Law School runs a clinic for their law students to help people set up businesses. A friend of a friend put me in touch with that, and they have helped us set up everything from beginning to end, absolutely free. They don't charge a thing. So that helped enormously, because I was surprised at how big a process is involved, getting official with the city and then official with the state and then the government. And anyway, they were invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. Just want to second that. Huge, incredible resource. And I mean, we wouldn't have been able to create this without the legal help. Absolutely. I mean, the legality of getting the bakery started and the abortion itself, pregnancy abortion itself, it all really requires a lot of intricate knowledge, as we're coming to learn. So I think getting sort of intimate with that process is helpful in terms of envisioning like the greater picture of what we're talking about here, how intense this issue really is.
Yeah, that's real. And great shout out to the law clinic. I've definitely, that's where we met. And they are an incredible, incredible group of people who really have pushed forward so many businesses. I know for you all, it's kind of sticky, like there's not only is there the structuring of it, but all the legal issues. And, Nan, you mentioned that things are worse than before. And I think it's powerful that you mentioned like being able to take it for granted. Like I certainly I did. Like it just my entire life I was born and it existed. And so it's kind of a shock. It's kind of a shock, I think, for the entire country. So could you share like what do you see on the horizon, or what's been going on right now?
Well, to me, what's the most shocking, and I'll mention another shout out to this article that has been my Bible going on from the New Yorker. When Dobbs first came down, Gia Tolentino wrote a piece. I forget what the title, well, it was about criminalizing pregnancy, but she said, we're wrong to say, I guess a lot of people were saying, we won't go back, we won't go back. And she said, we're wrong to say that because it's not even as bad as it was. I mean, it's not, going back might not be so bad. Now it's just so much worse because of the criminalization of abortion and pregnancy. And back in the old days, people went and you couldn't get an abortion, but if you needed one and you had the resources and the connection, you got some sort of a legal abortion. And clearly that was risky for women and for doctors, but there wasn't this public atmosphere of both shame and criminalization. Now, well, in Texas, individual citizens are allowed to report not only a woman getting an abortion, but anybody who might have helped her. A doctor, a pharmacist who might have given her the medication she needed, a nurse who might have helped her through, the physical process. And these people can be fined $10,000. So you have your citizens. I mean, the idea of citizens spying on each other, that's the most extreme example, but because that's not true all over the country, but it was inconceivable. And it just makes every single thing you do subject to public scrutiny.
Yeah.
For a young woman, they talk about women want to keep period charts anymore.
Right.
When anyone's seeing anything about their reproductive decisions. And I just can't imagine what that feels like as a young woman negotiating these things in the world. It's just stunning.
Yeah, and just to tack onto that, really, just one additional piece that I think was so critical in that piece that Gia Tolentino wrote was that the fact of internet, of surveillance and being able to surveil people online, like via these period tracking apps, or if you're able to look at someone's Google search and they're looking up abortion clinics or they're looking up, an abortion pill or whatever, that can now be used in order to criminalize this person, to corroborate evidence, etc. And when Roe was prior to Roe being enacted in this 1973, those tools we didn't have that scope of surveillance. And so that's a huge piece of why she thinks, right, it's worse, and we're not going back to where we were. It's significantly more intense than that.
Yeah. Well, like people weren't hunting for it, or like it wasn't this immediate like door closing or opening. It's like there were kind of the way there was the way things were. And it was inconvenient, but it wasn't this mass cultural shift in dynamic. So I really hear that. Go ahead now.
It also didn't have as profound an effect on reproductive health in general, in the sense that, I mean, obviously people who were engaging in illegal abortions and back alley abortions and stuff like that were physically at risk. But now, because in many states, you can't get an abortion until, like if you're having a miscarriage or an ectopic pregnancy, they won't give you an abortion until the fetal heartbeat is not detectable, which means, women are being sent home for 5, 6, 7 days to like wait through bleeding and any kind of potential health risk. That's new. The idea that you can't even protect your own health to the extent that you need to is just, yeah.
And I will just say, new in some places.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so a couple of places I want to go. First, Nan, you mentioned the shame of it. Like there is so much fear and so much shame. And we talked before about like the social stigma of like how it's supposed to look, how people are supposed to feel about it. And yeah.
I have strong feelings about that.
I know. Please share.
Well, I think the abortion rights movement did a bit of a disservice I understand why it happened, by buying into, in some ways, the anti-abortion rhetoric. That first of all, to call anti-abortion people pro-life people, well, that's ridiculous. Everybody's pro-life, but that immediately puts an abortion rights person as an anti-life person. That's bad. Then there was the whole thing where you had to preface everything conversation about abortion with, I know it's really terrible and it's devastating and it's horrible and it's going to be the biggest decision a woman makes, blah, 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 but we still have to have the right to do it. And even that I take issue with, because many women don't feel that way. It's not an easy decision. It's not an easy thing to go through. It's a fairly easy, but many women it's a life-saving thing for many women, and not just in terms of their health, but in terms of not having to have a pregnancy and a child when they're not ready. And you were never allowed to admit, oh, thank God I can get an abortion if I need it. And, I did it and I'm not devastated out of my mind. I can live with this. You weren't allowed to say that. And I think that was, so I think shame and stigma are partly that we just kind of bought into that view of things and had to say that in order to advocate for it. And I think it's unfortunate.
Yeah. Like there's a shame in actually being okay. And
yes.
Yeah.
I have a friend who has done a lot of health advocacy, and she made the distinction between what you feel about making the decision and what you feel about going through the process, which was very interesting. She said most women, and I just read a study about this where they talked to women who had abortions, do not regret the decision and felt very comfortable making the decision. They knew what they wanted. The procedure, it's a medical procedure, and there's a lot involved with it that's painful and icky and all that sort of stuff. And that can color your sense about, did you make the right decision? And was it a hard decision to make? I think the study I just read about this morning made it sound like when they poll people who've had abortions, like 95% of them were comfortable with their decision, didn't regret it, were glad to be able to make it, and they shouldn't have to apologize for it.
Yeah. I mean, because you're stacking, like, I think about in the article you sent, it referenced the 10-year-old girl. And, this is one example of things that have happened so many times over, but her needing an abortion after a sexual assault. And I'm like, wow, when you look at that, like you're layering trauma upon trauma upon trauma. And this 10-year-old girl with any agency would probably say, hey, no, I would feel really great to not do this right now.
Yeah.
And that's something that we're taking away, like to not have a kid, blah, blah, blah. I think you know what I was saying. And yeah, like just that the element and the layers of the social stigma make a huge difference, I think, to how people are seen, how we move through the world. And just that shame from other people like that alone is enough to make one feel bad about the process, not so much the decision, about both the process and the decision, just because of the level of judgment.
I don't know. Do you guys feel as younger people that the shame around it, well, it's hard to talk about because California is so different from the rest of the country. I just lost your sound, Nika.
Oh, sorry. I was.
Oh. Okay.
I was mouthing. I wasn't speaking.
Oh, okay. It is hard. That's one reason we were interested in doing this work, because we want to connect with people in other parts of the country, because here it's easy to say, oh, who's ashamed of this? People do it, we live in a bubble. But my sense was that until now, especially that some of that shame had gone away, but maybe I'm wrong.
I'll certainly speak to that. Growing up in Missouri, Midwest 90s, fun times. I remember in middle school, someone asking if I was pro-life or pro-choice, and I didn't have any context of what that meant. Like there was nothing there. And so
it sounds like I'm both. I like life and I like
yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, do I have to choose? I mean, it was the weirdest thing. And at the time, being so naive, of course, I'm like, well, sure, like pro-life, because it sounds good. It sounds good to the ear, just like you were saying. And those spaces, I mean, there's enough shame in that. I've seen so many teenage girls have children and be in compromising situations because that's the thinking. That's the common dominant thinking in that place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's intense. I mean, and I think it's really, I mean, because we know like Missouri has now criminalized abortion, right? And so I think to Nan's point about living in this bubble where for the most part, people I'm surrounded with, I don't think there is shame and stigma. But I think the advantage here is being in a state, and specifically in the Bay Area, where most people have a pretty progressive view on abortion. It was a way that we could sort of exploit that, our place, and being able to really generate funds in order to send it over to other places where the procedure's still happening, still necessary, but maybe there isn't that same out and about, like out and loud ability to talk about it and
Or
support it.
access, yeah.
Or access. I mean, access realistically, but just
Yeah.
also, even if, it just felt like that's how, to be a real true United States, that sort of felt like a way to engage with people who didn't have the same opportunity to discuss this sort of thing with any without shame.
Yeah, that's huge. We've been looking at the privilege. Like, there's certain elements of privilege being in California, like geographical privilege. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. Lots to say about that.
So
Certainly.
What was that, Nan?
No, I didn't say anything.
Oh, yeah. So, like, looking at what I'm just, gonna be honest, like crossing state lines, like going in and making a difference, because there are people who do need this support, who don't have access to these resources. And I know we talked a bit about what that looks like. So where are these places where the funding needs to happen most, honestly?
It's a good question. I mean, I think so. So we're pretty focused on an organization called ARC Southeast, which helps southeastern states. So Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Tennessee. Those are sort of, we really wanted to ensure that funds we raised went to people in those places, specifically because those were states where the procedure has been heavily criminalized, if not, like, when I say heavily,
and then there's no abortion clinic in
Mississippi.
They don't even have a single abortion clinic.
No, there's some of these states, there's not even a single abortion clinic. Some of these states are extremely, I mean, they're sort of a range of how criminalized abortion is. Some it's illegal, even in the case of incest or rape. Others, it might be legal in that case, but not for any other autonomous reason. And then, yes, beyond that, the actual physical access, the geographic privilege. Mississippians do not have a single abortion clinic in the state. And then even neighboring states, it's extremely hard to get access to if the procedure is even allowed. So we really wanted to ensure that people who are more landlocked were receiving, we were thinking of when we were trying to raise money. That felt very important.
That's huge. And that's ARC Southeast. We'll make sure that that's accessible for people to expand their knowledge. And then you shared about, like, what the funding is going towards. I was, and it seemed so, simple before we had the conversation. And I'm like, oh, like, there's more to it than people think. So share about, like, what, how much support is actually needed.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So abortion access funds do fund the abortion procedure itself, but it also funds quite a bit more. So it goes towards accommodations when someone has to travel. It goes towards actual travel costs themselves. It goes towards childcare. If the person has a child and needs someone to watch them, well, they have to literally go out of the state to get a medical procedure. So there's quite a few. I think there's some other organizations. Some organizations vary. There might be a few other things that it helps, but those are sort of the essential components of it. That it goes beyond the procedure. I think the procedure, depending on the state, is like about $500. But then on top of it, if you have to fly or drive, lodging, childcare, you have to take off work. I mean, it adds up real fast. Especially if it's not covered by your insurance, so, which it likely isn't. and we can get into that. But yeah, so the concept of access funds comprises quite a bit. And it's a range.
I love that phrase, access funds. That's huge. That's huge. And I know we talked even about like having advocates through the process and what that looks like.
Right.
And like these people also need to be supported in, you know, in the time that they're spending. So there's just so many layers. There's so many layers of it. And I don't think it's something that we pay enough attention to.
Absolutely.
You also brought up childcare, and I think, you know, to your point earlier, Nan, about like this isn't something that necessarily feels bad. This isn't something that's, you know, like going to be disempowering for someone outside of the social stigma. And I think about like, you know, people who are already parents and they're like, okay, like we can't do more of this, or just no, you know, like the spaces where it's not just a like I feel like the anti-abortion movements are like, you just want to kill babies, and it's like, no, we actually want to save lives, in my opinion. So go ahead, Nan.
Well, there's another phrase that the anti-abortion movement threw around that colored things a lot, which was people just want abortion on demand.
Right.
I demand an abortion. And then there's this whole hierarchy of reasons that are considered, well, it's okay if you're 15 years old and you were raped, but it's not okay if you're 28 and you already have a child, you should just have another child. And even that just makes me crazy, because it's such a personal decision. Nobody makes it lightly, as if like, oh, I'm just going to go do this. I don't want a kid. But there's a range of reasons, and all of them are valid, really. I mean, it's a misunderstanding that women are just running around demanding abortions right and left, because for why? Why would they do that? You know, it doesn't even make sense. And yet it was the anti-abortion activists' way of demonizing women. And that's partly what this is all about, unfortunately.
So well said. Thank you. Like that is exactly it. And we talked about surveillance earlier. There's, do we all just feel icky? Just a lot icky.
Yeah.
Like, and I feel like there's a word that's uniquely different than surveillance. It's about like your neighbors and, you know, friends and people who, you know, are close to you being able to report and, you know, and do something that's going to ultimately potentially destroy your life. Like it's such a weird feeling. But I do know that like your organization, you know, and you shared with me about some other support systems and networks that are happening out there that are consistently empowering people, that are a little on the civil rights side, I'll say.
Right.
Disobedience side, I guess, too.
What was that?
A little bit also the civil disobedience.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. So we talked about the aunties, and I'm going to have you explain about this in much greater detail. But when you were sharing this about me, I was immediately like, oh, this is like the Underground Railroad. Like we're actually moving people safely from one environment to another through a support network that, because of the prejudice, has to be very hush hush, or because of the bounty hunting and all the other criminalizing of it. So please, can you share a bit more about like...
Let me also read you something that just absolutely stopped me in my tracks this morning. I think it's from Gia's article. It said, in Missouri this year, a lawmaker proposed a measure that would allow private citizens to sue anyone who helps a resident of the state get an abortion elsewhere. As with something else, this law would reward successful plaintiffs with $10,000. The closest analog to this kind of legislation is the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793. Just knocked my socks off. Can you imagine?
Wow.
That's what I wrote. Wow, at the top of that. Jesus, when this is how we choose to use our resources to go back to something like the Fugitive Slave Act. Oh, what a hard, yeah.
It gotta just put in the side of there too. Like Missouri was the northernmost southern state allowed to have
Right.
slaves. Like it doesn't surprise me that this is in their legislation and behavior that's reiterating itself.
Mhm.
On our first episode about Roe v. Wade, we talked a lot about human trafficking and how
Mm.
this entire overturn is really going to increase that and increase so many other problems, which we know human trafficking is the modern day term for slavery. Like
Mhm.
that is what we are looking at, and we're not analyzing it from that point. It's still got all that, the marketing and, everything else we've been talking about. It's like, let's get underneath it.
Mhm.
Because being pregnant, like having an abortion, it should not be a crime. And I
Right.
feel like as someone who could still bear a child, if I get pregnant, I might be in the position to make any type of choice, which then makes me a suspect for a crime just by virtue of being pregnant.
Really important thing to say. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And also, there's another aspect to it that I have a friend who wrote an editorial for, I forget where it was published, but it was about how, I had something here too, about these rules make you, put you in an adversarial relationship with your own body. And
Right.
if you know that getting an abortion is a criminal act and you would be liable, and it also said, then you're angry at your own body for doing things. And you also might feel like you're afraid to go. It said that it can be a health risk because you might not go get prenatal care. If you are going ahead with the pregnancy, you might be afraid to avail yourself of health things that you need to do. And that it's just it's an adversarial relationship. That was an interesting, frightening concept to think of.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah, it's an important point.
Yeah.
And I mean, like so many other things in this country, particularly surrounding healthcare. I
Yeah.
mean, this country has an abominable relationship with healthcare. We
Yeah.
simply don't seem to understand what it is or why it's important. But I mean, too many people already don't go to the doctor because of what it'll cost them. And it costs them, their lives a lot of the time. I think the same is true in this instance with abortion. What if you're pregnant, you decide to reveal that and then change your mind, and then you have it on the book, someone knows, and that could be a problem for you. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't ensure safety. It's not prioritizing safety at all. Um, and I guess and to get back to the point of the aunties, I think that's why the aunties are such a comforting concept, because these are people who are really trying to make sure that people are getting, in an underground covert way, trying to get people abortion pills however they can if they're living in a state where it's inaccessible. They're trying to help people get across state lines. They're helping people get in touch with doctors, find places to stay, be it on their own couches. It's a really complex network of people who are genuinely doing what they believe is in the best interest of a person, rather than observing what the current law dictates, because they believe it doesn't work.
Ooh. Ooh.
There's an interesting podcast. I think it was This American Life, about a woman. I think she lives in the South somewhere, and she's in her early 80s. And she kind of made a decision. This is what I want to do with the rest of my life. And she somehow connected with, I can't remember how she connected with, some sort of an underground network of abortion pill smuggling, basically, where they send the pills to her in disguised packages, and she has connections with all sorts of abortion providers who can give the pills to women. And it's just amazing to think that's where we are.
Mm-hmm.
It's something so basic that affects
Right.
every woman in the, and any person wanting to be pregnant, not just women, obviously. But it's people are taking risks to do this,
Yeah.
to help out in this way.
Yeah, and there is that element where it really is about the freedom of choice.
Yeah.
Like I think again, pro-choice being vague in itself, but that really is when you can choose whether or not you are being forced to have kids or whether or not you're being forced to limit how many kids you have, it's the forced part that gets overheard.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's frustrating. So as I get over my upset, what are some of the solutions that you see, that we could really lean into? Legal solutions.
Well, I'm a little, to the dismay of some of my political friends, I'm a little more leaning into electoral politics. I don't have super great faith in it, but I feel like the only option for getting Roe v. Wade codified into law, which is the Democrats have talked about that. They talk about it. They don't have any chance of doing it because they don't have enough of a majority right now in the Senate. And now they, of course, can't get the House to go along now that it's Republican. But I still feel like somewhere down the line, if the anger keeps building and if the energy from the midterms persists into the next election, if we could get another Democratic president, a real majority in the Senate, and keep the House, codifying Roe v. Wade in the Constitution feels like the best, and also state legislatures. I think that's another thing about elections that are incredibly important. That so much of this, if this is going to stay with the states, then the key is making sure state legislatures stay in the hands of Democrats as much as possible. I tend to forget that when there are big elections and I, go for the top line candidates, but I know people who are working on, state legislators, just people you never even heard of, but have more power in this regard than the president, and at this point anyway. So that's my thinking on that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think really ensuring that it's a top priority. I mean, if we're keeping it within the realm of, elected politicians and what people are doing at that level, then yes, codification in my mind is the only way to ensure we don't have to deal with this flip-flopping anymore, because already we're seeing that individual states are codifying in their own state constitutions. If Democrats can say this is one of our top 3 priorities, then theoretically it'll be a priority of the party. And if they were back in executive leadership, we could push, because like we spoke about before, when Roe was put in place in the 70s in 1973, abortion activists were pushing that Roe be codified in the Constitution, and it never was. Both Republicans and Democrats refused to do it. And so if that had happened, if it had been codified, we would not be where we are now. So it's really, really, really imperative that ultimately happens in order to ensure that something like this can happen again. And so I agree with Nan. I think, but I also understand a lot of people, for various reasons, are losing a lot of faith in our political system, have been forever for a variety of other reasons, so I think if you do still have some faith in the system, for whatever, in this element of the system, that's my advice. But if you don't, I think that's why this movement is so interesting, because there is so much underground action. There is so much that people are doing on a very small local level to ensure that this be possible.
I'd also like to see some leaders emerge. I feel like we don't have as vigorous a movement as I was kind of expecting after the Dobbs decision. There was a big march, and there are places where things are happening, but I still am kind of waiting for some national leader to really emerge and keep people energized and pressure politicians. You talked about activists pressuring politicians. I feel like we need more of that, and I'm not sure where that's going to come from, but I'm hoping somebody takes the reins there.
Yeah. Sorry.
No,
I just wanted to ping in, Nan, you had mentioned how, like, right now the uproar and the upset around this isn't nearly like it's compared to what was happening in the 60s. Like, it's not nearly the amount of action and activity, and also it feels more hopeless. That's what I believe.
Well, on the other hand, I'd have to amend that because of the midterms and what happened in Kansas and things like that. I feel like it's just not harnessed yet quite to the point where we're just hearing about it on a national level. We should be having more marches, more pressure campaigns. It certainly seems to bubble up around, and it's clear that people are in favor of abortion. It's like 70% of the public is still in favor of abortion rights. So it's there, and I don't feel it's hopeless from that point of view. I just feel like I would like to see it take the next stage and really just stay on the national scene with more regularity and vigor.
We do have a question in the chat, and I saw that you saw this, Zoe. Do you see any corporations that are doing what you're doing with the bakery on a larger scale?
That is a really good question. So there are some, like I know Dick's Sporting Goods sent an email out that sort of went viral that essentially told their employees, if any of you, because they're all over the country, and they essentially said, we'll support you, we'll pay you, etc. If you need to leave the state in order to get this procedure. And I know a few other corporations have followed suit on that, at least in San Francisco, where it's relevant. I know that some tech companies have also said similar things in terms of having offices all over, and not all tech companies have done that. Like, for example, Facebook or Meta has been completely silent about it. But other tech companies, I think like Twitter potentially, and a few others have made the same offer to their employees. And I know for tech companies going into Texas, for example, that's a big thought in the equation, because Texas is so hardlined about it. And they're bringing this huge exodus of theoretically progressive people coming from the Bay Area who are used to this being something they have access to. So that said, corporations are offering pay to their employees. They're offering access funds essentially to their employees, but I don't know anything about whether or not they're donating or whatever. I'm sure certain ones are, but I don't know enough about that. But I do know people are talking about that.
It'd be nice if we could find a way to track that, to find out who's doing, what companies are doing what.
Yeah, that would be interesting, huh?
Yeah.
It was right when it happened, right when Dobbs came into play. I started seeing things on the internet circulating about that about a week later. But it would be good to keep tabs.
Nice. And I think that there's something unique, like all the organizations you mentioned are doing something really powerful and really great. And also there is the implication that you have a job, and that you have a job with that company. And like the work that you're doing is certainly a greater level of access, and supporting your organization not only makes a difference for people who are in these locations, but people who are in these locations who would never know about the resources.
Yeah, that's huge. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's so many. I mean, if you could be living, in so many different parts of the country where you just don't even know where to turn, where talking about abortion is stigmatized, shameful. I mean, how does the conversation even get to start? So,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm running through ideas in my head right now. Like, if I were there, how would I find the people?
Yeah.
I'm thinking like Planned Parenthood, maybe, because there are Planned Parenthoods, but this would be a useful thing for us to do a kind of case study and like a timeline of, you find out you're pregnant in one of these states and you're not employed and you're this and you're that. How literally, what's the first phone call? What's the next thing? How do you set that up? Because I have no clue, really.
And especially with the surveillance stuff, which I think Gia Tolentino talks about, like, right. If you even Google something on an unprotected search, when you're not in dark mode or whatever, like, that's even starting the process, even calling someone, right. Telling someone could be a potential risk for you, right? So it's just
project.
Confiding in a healthcare professional, like, that then puts them at risk potentially too. I mean, it's like, It's
I'm so
just,
glad you said healthcare professional. Medical censorship.
yeah.
Like I almost forgot about that one, and I'd love for you to share a bit more about that because it's so real.
Yeah.
Like, please.
Nan, you should take this one, I think.
Well, I read an article, I know I brought it up yesterday. I don't remember all the details, but it was sort of about the chilling effect on even doctors, and talking about cases in public forums, and people who are involved in helping people get abortions. I'm not quite sure what other sort of public forums these things happen, but like, clinics in a hospital, and doctors will report on cases. They just said there's like a chilling effect, that people are really just not supposed to be talking about it, period, which doesn't help in terms of sharing resources. And I'll have to pull that back up and get more details about that. But it was just about the kind of communication that happens within the medical community, and publicly, from people involved in these issues, feeling like they should just keep it to themselves, not make it a public conversation.
I just realized that this definitely is all encroaching on freedom of speech, which
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in that article that Nan's referencing, it starts off discussing that case we discussed earlier about the 10-year-old girl from Ohio who had to cross state lines to go to Indiana to get this procedure. And the article starts by talking about that doctor who's currently been handed some sort of criminal lawsuit. I can't remember what it was, but it essentially for claiming that the doctor didn't went to the media first about the case, rather than reporting the case to CPS.
Yeah.
But this doctor, and mind you, I don't think the hospital wanted her to be talking about it at all. But mind you, this doctor, this child was from Ohio. So the CPS, and the case was already reported to CPS in Ohio. So that was already out. She didn't need to do that. On top of it, the doctor, I think, even did still do her due diligence and report it to some higher authority, but it was outside of her jurisdiction because the crime had happened in Ohio, not in her state of Indiana, where abortions for rape victims were permissible, right? That's why this family went across state lines. So, I mean, and so then so this doctor spoke out and then was indicted for speaking out because it claimed that she was sensationalizing the incident rather than putting the best interests of the child first. I mean, it's just, so I think that was also, it's a scare tactic, right? Like, so things like that are happening. Hospitals aren't wanting their own employees to be speaking out about this stuff. It's just a total mess. And yeah, it does challenge freedom of speech. It does challenge freedom of religion, as Betty's noting. And Nan and I are both Jewish. We can talk about that. But yeah, there are absolutely challenges to other things that are enshrined in law that people should be allowed to utilize to their advantage.
So real. And I think we have the opportunity here. You mentioned like Roe v. Wade passed about, almost 50 years ago. And so we're looking at the span of time where something that was created, like I have the experience that every single thing we do is like it's going to go about 50 years out ahead of us, like every decision today.
Yeah.
It's going to impact the next 50 years. And so, like you were saying, getting this codified in the Constitution, like that means that there's going to be more than a 50-year run, and we're actually going to be able to have access to this. So I really see, these new opportunities, this new generation, like, stand up and contribute, because this is your future and this is your children's future. And that's why we vote. That's why we use our voices. It's for that.
It's interesting. The next year will be the 50th anniversary, 2023. Maybe that will be a really great galvanizing point, and for public action.
Hopefully.
Yes.
Especially prior to the 2024 election. I feel like it's a good opportunity. Yeah.
So please tell us how we can support My Bakery, My Choice, if we can make any orders to support the wonderful work that your organization does and the incredible people out there who need these services.
Well, I think once we have our website up and running, which will be soon, we will be posting where we're going to be doing sales. It will be what mybakerymychoice.com will be the basic address. If you just keep the title in mind, we'll be showing where we're going to be. You can go to mybakery.com at gmail.com. What's the
mybakerymychoice@gmail.com.
At gmail.com.
And if you want an order, sorry.
Right, you can make an order through through the email, a special order. That's something we're really hoping to build up, more special orders. And even if you're having a small event, a holiday party, and you want to order desserts for the party, that's a great way to do it. Yes.
I'm having ideas.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I don't want to cut you off, but everyone, I have had the macaroons. They are incredible. I mean, everything is incredible. The brownies, but the macaroons, like, yes, 100% get on that. And we're going to have to talk about how much those are, because I have an event Friday after next. So.
Ooh, that's good to know. Yeah, and I think something else to say, Nan does more. I do some of the baking, Nan does more of the baking, but I don't know, we take special orders. So there are things we make that are in our roundhouse or in our repertoire, but also if
you can ask for anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been making pumpkin cheesecakes is one thing around Halloween, Thanksgiving, that kind of thing. And I'm pretty much open to making anything within reason. There's certain things I probably wouldn't tackle, but you can ask for anything.
Love it. Love it. Now I'm hungry. Okay. Is there anything else that you want to share? Any last minute resources, other information on the work that you're doing and how people can follow up?
Let's see.
I know.
No, I don't think so.
Macaroons.
Yeah.
Macaroons.
Yeah, I mean, I think we did cover a lot of ground. I think the biggest thing is that, yeah, I mean, whatever you order from us will go to fund ARC Southeast. If you don't have a sweet tooth, I guess just go directly to them.
I would say that because one thing that's true about our nonprofit designation, there are different ways you can get a nonprofit designation, and in ours, is it true that people can't
write it off? Yeah.
Which is, we were disappointed about, but it turns out even if we had the designation where you could write off your donation, because you're getting something for it in return, you have to deduct the value of the goods. So unless you're catering a huge party, and it wouldn't be really worthwhile for anybody anyway. So if we're telling people, if they really want to donate substantial sums, just go to the organization. It would probably not the most efficient, unless they want to just support us. They just won't get the deduction.
But very helpful in terms of holiday parties. If any of you have a holiday party coming up, or just you want to impress someone or whatever, we've got you covered, and it goes to a good cause.
Yes, excellent.
Beautiful, beautiful. Oh, macaroons and chill. Okay.
Love that.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap up today. Thank you both so much for being here. This is an incredible conversation, and I really love the work that you're doing in the world.
Thank you. Ditto. Thank you so much.
Great. Yes,
it was really a joy to be here. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. All right, everybody out there, thank you so much for joining us today. The ItCast is our community outreach podcast that increases diversity in conversations on health and sexuality. Through this work, we are creating a world where all people feel loved, honored, and respected. Join us next Wednesday, December 7th from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. for the Monogamy to Polyamory Virtual Summit hosted by Elizabeth Cunningham. You can see my talk, Metamors, What the Fuck? And that will be going from 1:30 to 2. It's going to be a lot of fun, y'all. Okay. You can also check us out, the Global Sexual Health and Freedom Summit, February 4th and 5th, 2023. This is the first summit created to empower all people around the world to embrace sexuality as an aspect of being human that connects us all. With 14 speakers on topics ranging from womb health to loving your body, changing limiting beliefs, and overcoming prejudice. You can register for that at sexhealthsummit.com. Okay, sorry. Stuff was coming in through the chat, you guys. So excited. All right, ask us anything as you're doing now. We're definitely going to address that in some of our follow-up content. Click the link in the comments below. Get access to our bonus content on Patreon. Learn more about this work at theitcast.com. Subscribe to this YouTube channel and share with your community. We will see you here next week.
Bye.